Hi, everyone. Steve Porter from the Stevan Porter for Herndon Council campaign. Wanted to take a few minutes and just catch people up on what happened at the work session this week, October 15th, at the Herndon Town Council chambers. As always, this is a campaign presentation. While I do my best to fairly summarize what has happened, the opinions expressed are mine and mine alone. They do not represent the town council, Herndon Board of Zoning Appeals, or either of my employers, Oracle Corporation or the Loudoun County Department of Fire and Rescue. Also, important to just for legal reasons, remind you that this is paid for and authorized by the Stevan Porter for Herndon Council campaign. So the legal stuff out of the way, let's talk a little bit about what happened on Tuesday at the work session. So let me share my screen, make sure I select the correct screen this time. All right, so hopefully people can see the town agenda. This is the clerk site. I really do strongly encourage people to look at the clerk site before the meetings and after the meetings. This is where you can find the agendas, presentations, supporting materials, and both the live stream during the event, as well as a recording after the event. So if I say something you want to take a closer look at it, you can come here, view the meeting files, view the recording, actually see what they directly said. Maybe your interpretation will be a little different than what I heard. So definitely check it out. The clerk has done a really good job with this system and with this site. So, all right, so work session looked like it was going to be a relatively short work session. It turned out to be a bit longer than most of us thought it would be, but that happens. There were really 3 discussion items and then a roundtable. Roundtable, some typical right before election type stuff in the roundtable, but there really wasn't a lot of substantive type stuff in the roundtable. So the discussion items really were sort of where the time was spent. So the 3 items for discussion were the leases at 750 Center Street, the American Rescue Plan Act, the ARPA update, and then a discussion on affordable housing, a process, how that could move forward, that type of stuff. This last one was definitely where most of the meat of the meeting was. So having shown you all of that, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about this stuff. So first of all, 750 Center Street is Arts Herndon. Or Arts Space, depending on how old you are and how long you've been around. And last week at the public hearing, so not this week, but before that, a number of people, myself and others, were surprised when the interim town manager brought up that the leases with Arts Herndon actually have expired over the summer. So they're basically on a holdover type of situation right now. And he was discussing options that included the potential of doing an immediate order to vacate, which would be totally disastrous for Arts Herndon because, you know, a lot of what Joe does at Arts Herndon is host events, various art shows, exhibits, weddings, celebrations of life, music type things. And she has those booked out for a ways in advance, right? And so that really sort of worried a bunch of us who support the arts in Herndon, including me. So at the work session, though, fortunately, some things were clarified. It was pretty clear that the majority of the council, led especially by actually Councilperson Scherf and Councilperson LeBlanc, sort of led this, and they actually were on the same page, which is always good. And the short version of this is that Arts Herndon and Next Stop Theater, which also has space in that same facility, are going to get notified that they will have 90 days from the signing of the Comstock agreement to vacate. So 90 days, give or take. So assuming that that agreement gets signed as is anticipated on December 10th, that means they would have until effectively the end of March 2025 to vacate. And with groundbreaking technically scheduled to start in late April 2025, the timing's about right. So that was reasonable. I think you know, that's plenty of notice. It gives Joe and Next Stop Theater people adequate time to start making plans. And, you know, Joe knows that she can safely schedule stuff through the Christmas and holiday season. And she also has a good idea of when she needs to stop scheduling things to begin the transition to the temporary space. And for those of you who don't know this, way back in 2017, when the Comstock project should have actually started breaking ground if it hadn't been for the lawsuit and things like that, we actually have space in a town facility to temporarily relocate Arts Herndon. And we actually, as a town, spent some money to sort of retrofit it and stuff like that. And it's over by the police station. So I think it's actually in the same building as the police station. At the one end of that building, there's space for Arts Herndon. And then there's another building in that complex. The town owns that complex, basically, where there is some additional storage type space that's shared actually with some elected officials, the county supervisor, the House of Delegates member, the state senator have sort of a field office presence there. So Arts Herndon does have a space to move to. Not as, I don't think it's as good of a space or convenient of a space as it is downtown, but at least there is a plan. So bottom line on this one is it had people scared because I don't think it was communicated well. And that's something we always have to be careful about, is communication of stuff so stuff doesn't surprise people like that is important. And so anyway, so I think it is going to work out fine. Looks like short story is that Arts Herndon, assuming that the deal with Comstock actually does go through, will need to vacate effectively by the end of March 2025 and move to the new space. Now, the town won't be helping them actually do that move. The move is on them, and it's also on Next Stop to move their stuff as well. But there's a plan, and so I think we're okay there. The other thing just to keep in mind is that actually, regardless of what happens with Comstock, the current Arts Herndon facility is pretty much at the end of its usable life. There's a bunch of issues with it, ranging from plumbing to actual some structural issues, especially back in the storage area, not the area where most events get held, but back in the storage area. And then the only other thing that was brought up by, I think Councilwoman Scherf again, specifically, was hoping that our business development office was working with the bookstore to help them find some place, because that really is a cool little local bookstore and you just don't find those things. And so it'd be a shame if, you know, as due to this move, if we lose that. So hopefully business development, community development can help find a new space for them as well. So that's the leases at 750 Center Street. One moment, please. All right, don't want to cough in people's ears. That's just rude. All right, so the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act update. Basically, the short version here is that we have to have all funds fully encumbered by the end of this calendar year, or we have to return parts of the grant. We got something like $22.5 million from ARPA. We've actually encumbered, I think, all but 3 million or so of it. And so the key is that they've got about 2 million in projects that basically the ink is about to dry on the contracts. And so they'll be able to encumber that. And they have enough projects that qualify. That's critical for ARPA, is that the qualification conditions for the ARPA stuff are very, very stringent. They can only be used for certain things, but we've got some things planned. I don't know exactly which ones they're ultimately going to use. Probably will depend on which contracts actually finalize the soonest, because they need to finalize contracts for them to encumber the funds. And then longer term, the other key date is that all the money has to be spent and distributed by the end of 2026. So it's got to be completely formally encumbered by the end of this year, and then it has to actually be spent all the contracts fulfilled, all that fun stuff by the end of 2026. But the town's on top of that. It's looking promising. And I think this is important because, as we've noted before, Herndon pays a lot of taxes. We're one of, if not the most heavily taxed jurisdiction in the entire Commonwealth. Our residents and businesses pay federal taxes, they pay state taxes, they pay county taxes, they pay Herndon taxes. And so it is important that when opportunities arise to get money back from somewhere higher up on the food chain, in this case, the federal government, that we take advantage of that and we make sure that our people, our communities, our businesses are getting a fair share back from the feds, the state, and the county from the money that they're putting into it. So looks like we're in good place for ARPA. All right. The affordable housing process outline discussion was the third and final thing. And David Stromberg, the town's zoning administrator, did a very nice presentation about sort of the three general buckets that we have to work with for affordable or workforce housing. Right off the top, I do want to note, I do support affordable and workforce housing. I think it has to be done correctly. It's also important to realize that affordable and workforce housing is not Section 8 housing. It's not, a lot of people, when they hear that, they think real low income type housing. They envision the New York projects or the London estates, or I forget what Chicago calls them, but those types of things, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about some rent control or sale price controlled properties that allow people who are making under the average median income to actually have a shot of being able to rent and or buy and live in the communities that they're working in. And that's expensive in Herndon. The average median income for a family of four in Herndon is $133,000 and some change. So we're not a cheap place. So, you can be making a fairly decent wage and still be hitting at 60 or lower percent of the average median income. And the key here is that you really don't want people having to spend more of a third of their income on housing costs. So that's sort of what they try to balance out with that. So that's sort of just a general observation. So the three models that really we have available to us under state law, again, we're a Dillon rule state, so we really can only do what the state allows us to do, is we can do proffers, although proffers are very, very heavily restricted and are generally not a good way to do this. The Commonwealth really cracked down on the use of proffers within the last decade. I saw that even on the fire and rescue side. Proffers used to be a very big deal of support for volunteer agencies and the county fire and rescue agencies. And because of the changes in proffers, that became much muddier. So there is potential to sort of use proffers, but it wasn't the way that the county administrator really was leaning, because proffers have to be directly tied to the impact of what the builder is doing. And that can be very hard to figure out in terms of things like affordable housing units and things like that. So it's not off the table, but it isn't something that we're really focusing a lot on, I don't think. So the second option is to use town-owned property for this. As the property owner, obviously the town has a lot of say in working with the developers and what's ultimately going to be put forward. So that's definitely on the table. The problem with that, and we'll get back to this after we talk about the third one, is that we honestly don't have that much town property anymore. Almost all of Herndon that is developable is developed. And so the remaining town-owned property is stuff that we already have institutional resources on. The town work area down off of 606, town hall, town green, and then the police station complex, and then parks, whether that's the various parks, the golf course, the community center, or Runnymede. Those are pretty much our options if we're trying to go with using town-owned land to promote this. And I have a lot of concerns about that. So I'll get back to those in a second. So the third and final approach here is basically to adjust the zoning ordinances and the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan has to be adjusted first, and then you can do zoning changes to allow a certain level of density increase in exchange for a certain number of affordable or workforce type housing. That is heavily regulated by the state. There's specific pieces of the state code that allow for that, and they dictate exactly what those ratios have to be. And that's probably where we're going to end up going with this. The problem with that particular approach, and Mr. Stromberg's PowerPoint is very, very good on this. So if this is something that interests you, I really do suggest you take a look at it, is that they have to redevelop in order to make any of this work. So you have to be able to put together a package that's going to be attractive to the developers, that makes it cost effective for them to want to offer affordable housing in exchange for increased density, or in some cases there's some other things like we can reduce parking requirements on some of it, some things like that. But you have to be able to put together a package that's competitive with what's going on around us, because as I've mentioned before, you can go 2-3 miles literally in any given direction and you're either in Fairfax County or Loudoun County. And if our policies are not as attractive as they are in those localities, then developers aren't going to build here. That's just the simple fact of the matter. So, so that one is probably where I think a lot of the effort's going to go. Mr. Stromberg went on to say that we need help. This is not something we can do with the resources we currently have on town staff. Some of it is extraordinarily highly specialized. Some of it just, it would take multiple staff people to try to make it work. And then they obviously have other things we're trying to have done with it. So the short thing there is we're going to have to engage a consultant. That's fine. And he estimates that that engagement would probably, from the point of engaging the consultant, doing all the background research, investigation and stuff that will be required, drafting necessary changes to the comprehensive plan, then making necessary zoning changes, then making memorandums of understanding with the Fairfax County Housing Authority, because we need them to administer the affordable piece of it, because the town doesn't have a housing authority. It's not something we can do as under the Dillon rules. So we need to partner with the Fairfax County Housing Authority. And then once you get all those pieces in place, which Mr. Stromberg thinks probably realistically we're looking at 18 months to 2 years to get to that point, then we've actually got to wait for developers to actually want to build. Because with zoning type stuff, it doesn't take effect until someone tries to redevelop in a substantially different way for properties that they own. So it's not a quick solution for workforce or affordable housing. It's likely, probably looking 8 to 10 years plus to really start to see anything with it. There may be some other opportunities around town that we can do stuff with faster, but it's not a quick solution. And so I think that's fair to note. All right, so how did the discussion on this go? Basically, Cesar and friends, especially Cesar, really want to push, we need this done now. How can we make this faster? 18 months to 2 years is too long. Well, if that's what it takes to do it right, then that's what it takes to do it right. I would hope that we've learned from some of the mistakes around the Comstock project and things like that, that especially when we're wading into sort of newer territory, stuff we haven't done, we've got to take the time to make sure we're doing it right, that we're looking at the different ramifications to infrastructure, although it doesn't directly impact us, health and human services, education, those are things that will impact the county. Rushing this forward without doing our due diligence for proper research, things like that would definitely be a mistake. So that's that. Then the one that just had me, well, one thing that terrifies me is that I have a feeling, I can't say this definitively, just sort of watching their reactions around the table and stuff like that, that the parks definitely piqued their interest. They're undeveloped land, generally speaking, and they would be town-owned land. So there are places we could theoretically move forward much faster. I'm dead set against that. I don't draw very many red lines when it comes to policy and stuff because I think compromise is important and listening to different viewpoints. That is one of a few red lines I will draw. I will do everything in my power to protect the parks and especially Runnymede. Um, bringing up our density is, we're already pretty dense. We're much denser than, say, Vienna. You know, our population density is something like 5,300 people per square mile or something like that. You know, we're competitive with Fairfax City in that way. We're not that far behind Arlington in our density. So we're already pretty dense. If you're going to bring that up even more, you know, where do people go to relax? Where do people find recreation? If we start tearing down our parks and things, you know, yeah, like I said, it's a red line for me. And then Runnymede is a treasure. I mean, it's something that really you don't find anywhere else around in Northern Virginia. It supports a lot of wildlife. It supports, you know, environmental concerns. You know, just a few weeks ago, this council was up in arms about the tree situation. Okay, so you're up in arms about the tree situation, but now you're potentially eyeing destroying our parks to put up housing developments. Yeah, I don't get it. So anyway, again, nothing concrete was said that they were going to target the parks or something. It's just sort of reading between the lines, which especially with certain people on this council is pretty important. The one thing that was actually said out loud and really sort of blew me away was Cesar actually suggested that we basically get rid of our police station, move it, and use that plot of land to build affordable housing. Either that, or maybe he was intending to co-locate the police headquarters with affordable housing units. Either way, it is plain stupid. You know, everyone hopefully knows I have a public safety background. They did research on where they might be able to move a police station over a decade ago. When they were looking at, you know, building out the rebuilding of a Herndon fire station, they looked at different options that might have allowed, for example, to co-locate those facilities, which is not at all uncommon. And it isn't a bad approach, actually, if you've got land somewhere that will work well for it, which Herndon doesn't. So the idea of, if we're going to get rid of a police station, okay, where are you going to move it to? We've already said we have very little already owned land in town. So where do you think you're going to move it to? And then the other consideration, especially whether you co-locate it or you're trying to move it somewhere else, is police stations are a high priority target for terrorists and others. While little community substations that sometimes you see in malls or, you know, particular housing areas or something, not so much. They're basically little field offices that, you know, officers can meet with people and stuff like that. But the actual HQ, where all the structure is for the police, you know, the dispatch is there, their armories are there, various things. They're highly hardened targets for a reason. And you don't want to take soft targets like residential and place them around that type of target. That's just stupid, flat out stupid. The other thing, coming from fire and rescue and having been a chief officer and president, is people tend to complain a lot about noise and activity and stuff that these stations generate. You know, everyone wants the ambulance, for example, to get to your house quickly, but they hate hearing the siren when it's not coming to them, for example. Well, the police station runs 24/7. There's always activity. So is that really a good mix for a housing development? Yeah, no. So again, that's something I would oppose pretty strongly. Um, None of this is, these were just ideas that were being floated. It was a work session. No action was taken. They're trying to figure out how to move forward. So, but that basically sort of summarizes what happened in about a little over 2 hours of discussion and presentations. Just so people know, there is no significant business. So Mayor Oldham has actually canceled the public hearing that was going to happen next week. So the next town council event will be the work session, which will happen on Wednesday, November 3rd. It's happening on Wednesday because obviously Wednesday, November 6th, because Tuesday, November 5th is election day. And surprise, there's other things going on for most of the council members that night. So we'll just have to see what's going on there. As far as my campaign goes, the early voting at the library started today at 1 o'clock. You can check my website. There's links to the Fairfax County information that tells you voting hours, things like that. Basically, short version, it's running, I think, 1 to 7, Monday through Friday, up until November 1st. I forget the exact hours on Saturday. I think it's something like 9 to 5, maybe, but you can check the website. Not this coming weekend, but the following weekend on the Sunday, there are some limited Sunday hours as well, but there's only one Sunday that they'll be doing in-person voting, absentee early voting. So turnout today was good. I voted today. I hope other people will get down and vote. And when you're voting, please, take time to learn about the different candidates and what they stand for. And, hopefully one of the candidates you'll vote for is Stevan Porter for Herndon Council. Again, this presentation recording was paid for and authorized by Stevan Porter for Herndon Council. As always, if you have questions, please reach out. I hope everyone has a great day. Bye.